Hey guys, so a while back I uploaded a couple of videos about Vulcan biology and Vulcan history. These videos were made years apart, so I feel like my presentation has changed quite a bit, but nevertheless, I thought some of you might like a supercut version of those videos. So here it is. And don't forget to subscribe, because there's more on the way. Hey guys, Tyler here. So, one of the most interesting aspects of the Star Trek universe is its hidden lore, the historical information that permeates the Star Trek timeline and manifests on screen in the form of archaeological discoveries and time travel escapades alike. I've examined several of Star Trek's ancient civilizations in previous videos of mine, but today I want to talk about one of the more iconic races in Star Trek, the Vulcans. I wanted to make a video about Vulcan history, specifically prehistory, for quite a long time, and with some of the recent developments in the franchise regarding this iconic race, I think that the timing is just right. The Vulcans are a race whose recorded history spans thousands of years, much like many of the other major races featured in the show. But their development as a society, and specifically the way that they allegedly came into existence, is quite unique among the various alien civilizations that we meet on screen. From their devastating nuclear exchanges, to the Romulan diaspora, to some possible tampering early in their evolution, Vulcan history is quite the epic story, one that casual fans might not have taken as deep a dive into as I have in doing the research for this video. So, without further ado, let's talk about Star Trek's ancient civilizations, the early Vulcans. Like the other humanoid races in Star Trek's Milky Way galaxy, it is suggested that the Vulcans originally arose from the seeded DNA sequence of an ancient humanoid civilization that lived 4.5 billion years ago. But in terms of what makes Vulcans unique, it's another ancient race that supposedly had a more direct influence. In the original series episode Return to Tomorrow, a landing party of the Enterprise crew interacts with the sole surviving members of an unnamed civilization whose minds have been transferred into spherical receptacles beneath the surface of their homeworld. One of the members of this species, Sargon, proclaims that his people had traveled the stars some 600,000 years ago, and that humans and Vulcans may be among their descendants. Now, astrobiologist Lieutenant Commander Ann Mulhall quickly corrects the record, clarifying that all evidence indicates that humans evolved independently. But Spock chimes in and says that Sargon's claim
would tend, however, to explain certain elements of Vulcan prehistory.
This is a curious remark, one that is not further ruminated upon in the episode as the team deals with the situation at hand. But this tidbit does receive a nod in the Season 1 finale of Star Trek Picard, in which the Romulan Narek theorizes that the apocalyptic story of Ganmadan is not a prophecy, but rather history that possibly predates the arrival of Vulcans on their own planet. Though Ganmadan is a part of Romulan mythology, the Romulans and Vulcans' shared ancestry does mean that their histories are intertwined. The veracity of this Romulan myth is, of course, rather muddied, but the subtle nod towards a more complex story of Vulcanoid origins does lend credence to the idea that their evolution was not as straightforward as might initially seem. Sargon's species is not explicitly named on screen, but script notes for Return to Tomorrow referred to them as the Oretians or the Oretans, coming from the planet Aret. Christopher L. Bennett's novels Watching the Clock, The Buried Age, and Ex Machina refer to them as the Sargonians, a name given to them by Federation archaeologists. The Sargonians are said to have formed a massive empire in the distant past, ruling for 100,000 years. They terraformed and colonized several worlds and mentored a number of junior races. The novels describe their empire as the union of two separate species, the other being an ancestor of the Deltan race, who we are introduced to in the motion picture. As the novels and Return to Tomorrow indicate, the Aret Empire befell a cataclysmic war that stripped Sargon's planet of its atmosphere. This was no ordinary nuclear age, but rather the trappings of a much greater conflict that Sargon says humans could scarcely comprehend. It's not entirely clear if Sargonian settlers on Vulcan are supposed to have acted as a proverbial Adam and Eve, or if the Sargonians introduced mutations into the proto-Vulcan genome, a la the ancient astronaut hypothesis. If there are truly missing links in the Vulcan evolutionary line, then either could be the case. We don't know the full details on whether there were Stone Age Vulcanoid hominids, much like the various hominid cousins of Homo sapiens on Earth. Other sources, such as Star Trek Online, also corroborate the idea that there is debate over the Vulcans' true origins. What is clear, in any case, is that whatever species first evolved on Vulcan, they would have to have dealt with a rather hostile environment. While it's likely that the planet has gone through several climatic shifts and probably once had a lusher climate, for most of Vulcan's recorded history, it's understood that the planet has been covered almost entirely in desert. The 1988 Trek novel Spock's World by Diane Duane suggests that a solar flare from 40 Eridani caused a massive climactic shift early in Vulcan evolution, and if something like this were really to have occurred, that could have provided an opportunity for the Sargonians to introduce some adaptations, such as the inner eyelid, to help early Vulcans better survive. This is entirely speculative, of course, and generally I don't like to rely on ancient aliens type interventions to explain evolutionary gaps, even of fictional races. But as I mentioned in my recent video about the Xindi, Star Trek's track record with accurate portrayals of Darwinian selection is not exemplary. As far as cultural evolution, we are often told in various installments that Vulcans used to be quite barbaric, even by Earth standards. This makes sense in the context of pre-Surak times, as Vulcan emotions are said to be strong. Their passions run even deeper than what we'd expect based on their normal behavior, but their capacity for controlling and suppressing these emotions is even greater. As early as 2700 BC, according to Spock, Vulcans had an aggressive colonizing period. While some Vulcans had begun the practice of suppressing their emotions around this time, for millennia, war and conquest would rage on. They developed space travel by the 9th century BC, according to Enterprise, establishing outposts such as the one on Pajim. They also had fewer encounters with hostile races, as at the time there were fewer warp-capable species. By the 4th century AD, however, Vulcans' rampant emotions and hostile warrior culture threatened to tear their society apart. Atomic weapons, as well as psionic weapons, such as the Stone of Gaul, which amplified violent thoughts into destructive energy, were detonated across the planet. But out of this nuclear exchange came the philosopher Surak, who helped usher in the so-called Time of Awakening, and transformed Vulcan society through his embracing of pure logic. Those who rejected Surak, referred to as those who marched beneath the Raptor's wing, eventually left Vulcan and went on to found the De Bruyne and Romulan civilizations. According to Ambassador Soval, it took nearly 1,500 years for Vulcan society to rebuild itself before they returned to the stars. Their subsequent encounters with species such as the Andorians, the Tellarites, Klingons, and numerous others are referenced throughout Enterprise, and the rest, as they say, is history. It's a story of how a society marked almost exclusively by violent and destructive acts for almost 2.5 millennia was eventually able to overcome its aggression and embrace a more peaceful lifestyle. It's also a story of how the devastation of nuclear war kept Vulcans from returning to space for a period far longer than it took humans to recover from their own World War III. Humans in Star Trek are generally regarded as being on the faster end of the spectrum when it comes to their rate of technological advancement and overall capacity for change, even in the post-capitalist age of the early to mid-22nd century. I think there's an easy explanation for why it took the Vulcans far longer to re-establish themselves. We see throughout the franchise that Vulcan science is sort of peculiar. What I mean by this is Vulcans, who are still, mind you, a religious people, are dogmatic as hell. For instance, not only does T'Pol steadfastly defend the Vulcan Science Directorate's assertion that backwards time travel does not exist, even in the face of countervailing evidence, nay, proof, but even in the 32nd century, as we see in Discovery, the belief among Vulcans that they had caused the burn leads them to suppress the SB-19 data, preventing further research on this post-dilithium form of warp travel. All of this is to say, Vulcan logic is often axiomatically employed in defense of preconceived notions, and challenging viewpoints are often dismissed out of hand without further investigation.
We've already received and reviewed the data around your presentation and found it lacking. I move to dismiss and end this quorum.
In a nutshell, while the Vulcans had Surak, they also could have used a Socrates. This predisposition against certain out-of-the-box lines of thinking probably hinders Vulcan scientific and cultural progression in their post-Surak history, even over 1,000 years in the future. It's this anathema to rapid development that also likely keeps Earth's warp program from taking off, so to speak, earlier than it did. Of course, I should clarify that this doesn't necessarily mean that the Vulcans were physically incapable of leaving their planet immediately after the Time of Awakening, as the offshoot that became the Romulans had to have gotten off-world somehow. Saval's dialogue in Enterprise isn't explicitly clear as to whether Vulcan's nuclear wars set them back technologically, since that might cause a contradiction in canon. But I think that the most straightforward interpretation is that it took the Vulcans 1,500 years to decide that they were ready to rejoin the interstellar stage, just as they believed that humans were too young and impulsive to do the same. So when they took flight again in the 19th century, it's only because that's when they as a society deemed themselves worthy enough to do so. But in the meantime, they would continue to face lingering questions about their identity as a species, questions that would continue to cause cultural divide, even far into the future. Some of the connections made in this video are rather speculative, I'll admit, but I think that based on the explanations and the background information that were given throughout the shows, I think that this perspective on Vulcan history is quite solid. I, of course, welcome any and all disagreement in the comments. Please let me know what you think about the information that I presented in this video. Before we go any further, I'd like to take a moment to talk to you about today's sponsor, me. Do you like merchandise? If so, head on over to the new and improved OrangeRiver merch store. That's right, OrangeRiver is now officially on Spreadshop. I've got a bunch of awesome new designs, including All the Way Down,
All the Way,
Vape God, Tally, aka Best Girl.
It was totally worth it.
And what is perhaps my greatest design yet,
I love being married to my husband.
Plus I've got some of my classic designs like OrangeRiver Arrowhead, N7, Metroid, Mycelial Network,
The Mycelial Network is like
Mycelial Network, and more. And there are even some new products like OrangeRiver hats. That's right, OrangeRiver hats now exist. Visit the link in the description to get discounts and other special deals on items from my store. Now, back to the video. Hey guys, Tyler here. The Vulcans are, of course, one of the most widely recognized alien species from Star Trek. A warp-capable humanoid species from a planet of the same name, Vulcans are a founding member of the United Federation of Planets and are widely represented throughout Starfleet. Known for their strict adherence to logic as well as their stoic personalities, Vulcans largely resemble humans save for their pointed ears, slanted eyebrows, and preposterous haircuts. But in fact, they have a lot of other biological distinctions from humans as well, especially internally. I made a video a while back about early Vulcan history and culture, especially the influence of Surak, and how the Vulcans may be descended from ancient astronauts who lived over 500,000 years ago, the Oretians, introduced in the original series episode Return to Tomorrow. But in this video, I'd like to focus on their contemporary physiology, as well as how their environment has impacted their evolution. Let's get started. As far as their appearance, we see that Vulcan skin color ranges from a common pale with a bronze or greenish tint to darker complexions, not unlike the skin tone range of humans. Most Vulcans have naturally straight, glossy black hair, but brown and curly hairstyles are not uncommon, and indeed some Vulcans even grow beards. The Vulcans' pointed ear shape and their more sensitive hearing overall are also the most logical outcomes of evolving on an arid homeworld with a relatively thin atmosphere, as sound waves would propagate more slowly and thus more weakly. Their ears would therefore be contoured to capture sound more efficiently. This may also be the reason why Vulcan females' sense of smell is so strong, as, like sound, odors would have more difficulty traveling through a thinner atmosphere. Vulcans are most comfortable in high temperatures, owing once again to their planet's warm climate. It makes sense then that their respiratory system is highly efficient at extracting oxygen, and Vulcan's predominantly desert environment also reportedly led to the evolution of the Vulcan inner eyelid to better block dust and other particulates. Continuing with their internal anatomy, a Vulcan's heart is located where a human's liver would normally be. Vulcans have no appendix, but they do have mitochondria, indicating that, like in humans, this prokaryotic single-celled organelle, being the powerhouse of the cell, fused together with the eukaryotic cells of Vulcan's distant ancestors. Vulcan blood is copper-based and medium green when oxygenated, hence the reason for pale-skinned Vulcans' olive complexion. Indeed, some Earth life uses copper instead of iron to bind oxygen within their blood, such as horseshoe crabs, though their blood appears blue. Whereas these arthropods' blood uses a different protein, hemocyanin, rather than hemoglobin, Vulcan blood is explicitly said to use hemoglobin as well. The Vulcan digestive tract is highly adaptable to a variety of alien foods, quite noteworthy in a galaxy with so much biological diversity. Vulcans have a superior metabolism to humans, with caffeine and other stimulants having little to no effect on them. They are capable of surviving long durations without food or sleep. Under stress, a Vulcan can go without sleep for weeks. Vulcans are on average 3 times stronger than humans and have faster reflexes, such as when they need to subdue a person with their notorious nerve pinch, and they typically have a lifespan of over 200 years. Okay, I've referenced the Vulcan homeworld quite a bit thus far, but what else do we really know about it? Well, Vulcan is the second planet in the 40 Eridani system, a real star system 16 light-years away, consisting of a K-type orange dwarf primary and white and red dwarf companions. These companions, 40 Eridani B and C respectively, orbit far enough away, 400 astronomical units on average, that they wouldn't significantly affect planets orbiting 40 Eridani A, also known as Kaid. K-type orange stars like Kaid, which are generally smaller, cooler, and slightly longer lived than our Sun, emit less light in the blue, energy-rich portion of the electromagnetic spectrum. Thus, many astronomers have considered them optimal for harboring extraterrestrial life due to this calm radiation environment. However, there is growing evidence that K-type stars emit dangerously high levels of X-rays and far ultraviolet radiation longer into their main sequence phase than G and M-type stars. This prolonged saturation period may have a sterilizing effect, destroying atmospheres or at least delaying the emergence of complex life in K-type stars' habitable zones. That said, 40 Eridani is approximately 5.6 billion years old. Even though it's considered a flare star, if the primary emitted sterilizing radiation for over 1 billion years after its formation, this would have subsided by the time the ancient humanoids first visited the system. Of course, in some non-canon novels, Vulcan was previously a lush tropical planet whose surface was scorched by a solar flare, forcing early life to adapt or die. This is also likely the reason that Vulcans can tolerate higher levels of radiation. Vulcan's orbit around Kaid is about 60% the distance that Earth orbits the Sun, the same radius as most K-type stars' habitable zones. While its day length is stated to be 24 hours, its orbital period would be under 2/3 of one Earth year, according to Kepler's laws of planetary motion. Vulcan is stated in some production sources to have seasons induced either by axial tilt or eccentricity, which cause Vulcan's sky to shift between red in the summer and blue in the winter. An observer standing on Vulcan's surface would see their sun appear 20% wider in diameter than our sun looks to us, as per an equation that governs relative height to distance and an object's actual size. Kaid's white and red dwarf companions would appear as unusually bright stars stars in the night sky, slightly brighter than the appearance of Venus on Earth in the evening. Vulcan's surface gravity is stated in various sources to be 1.4 G, which would have encouraged them to develop stronger muscles to overcome this additional gravitational force, perfectly in line with Vulcan's increased strength as seen throughout Star Trek. Shifting gears back to Vulcan's physiology, one of the most intriguing characteristics is their brain.
Brain and brain! What is brain?
As many tend to forget, Vulcans are not unemotional. In fact, it's said that their emotions are stronger than humans. They just suppress them. They even have a part of their brain dedicated to suppressing emotions in the mesiofrontal cortex. Vulcans can sense strong emotions in others, qualifying them as empaths, much like betazoids, though they're not as naturally advanced, being unable to read minds per se. Traumatic experiences are not only psychologically damaging to Vulcans, but have physical consequences as well. An example of epigenetics, environmentally influenced gene expression, or phenotypical alterations. The Vulcan brain is even capable of lobotomizing itself as it reorders neural pathways. Vulcans can, however, learn to gain conscious control of many of these functions, allowing them to highly regulate their body through sheer willpower. When injured, Vulcans can enter a trance-like state and focus all of their mental energy on healing themselves. Given the power of the placebo effect and evidence that meditating can have positive neurological effects, this isn't too out of the ordinary. Of course, Vulcans naturally have some levels of pain that they cannot suppress, forcing them to endure the experience. Famously, the Vulcans are a telepathic species, though they're not as evolved as, say, the Cairn, to the point of no longer needing vocal cords. They are capable of performing mind melds through touch, among a variety of other related abilities. Considerable training is required to hone this skill, but recipients do not require any concentration, training, or even conscious knowledge of the act, although it is customary for Vulcans to, ask permission before initiating a meld. These mind melds allow for the exchange of thoughts, memories, and sensations, in essence allowing the participants to become one mind, a sort of shared Gestalt consciousness. Vulcans are often erroneously considered touch telepaths by outsiders. However, while physical contact is not strictly required, it does enhance the effectiveness of a mind meld. This is likely because the electrochemical processes that presumably occur during a mind meld are easier to induce when the initiator and the recipient are in very close proximity, as the electric signals don't have to take as long to propagate. When performing the act, the initiator places the tips of their fingers at key points on the recipient's head. A mind meld can be used to probe another person's mind, or even transfer an individual's entire personality or soul, known to Vulcans as the Katra, into another body. This serves as an indication that in Star Trek, consciousness can in fact exist independently of the body, something that is still uncertain according to modern medical science. The exact source of Vulcan telepathy is unknown to outsiders. However, the underlying power may be associated with the concept of Quilari, a focal point in the bioelectric field of the Vulcan brain. In the TOS episode The Immunity Syndrome, Spock tells Dr. McCoy that he felt the combined shock and terror of the minds of 400 of his fellow Vulcans aboard the all-Vulcan crewed USS Intrepid as they suddenly died. The sister Constitution-class starship was at the time at least one sector away, meaning at least 20 light years. This, and not only this incident, is interesting as it suggests Vulcan telepathy is able to transit through subspace, by virtue of the fact that Spock's awareness of the tragedy appears to have happened faster than light. Truly even stronger, well-trained Vulcan minds are capable of non-contact telepathic projection and scanning, usually over short distances, but sometimes over light years of interstellar space, when a strong Kotric bond between the communicating individuals has been pre-established, again strongly suggesting a subspace component to their communications. Vulcans can also engage in telepathic suggestion or compulsion, whether consciously or unconsciously. Mind melds do carry some risks. They can be physically debilitating for both parties and can potentially aggravate pre-existing conditions through pressure changes. The act of melding itself results in a partial loss of identity and self-awareness and can be difficult to break. Another side effect is the transfer of emotion, such as when Spock melded with James T. Kirk in the 2009 Star Trek film. After effects of mind melds can often be treated with drugs. An improperly trained melder can cause a recipient to develop a degenerative neurological disorder called Pinar syndrome, fatal if left untreated. 22nd century Vulcan medicine does not have a cure for Pinar syndrome, but the disorder and its cure were known as far back as Surak's time, the 4th century AD. It's likely the loss of the cure over millennia was the result of festering prejudice against melders, though the cure itself, a corrective meld performed by an experienced melder, is eventually rediscovered, and by the 24th century, the fact that the Katra can be transferred between individuals and Kotric arcs, arguably a form of mind uploading, is a commonly accepted medical practice. This is huge, considering that in real life, while it's likely an emergent property of our brain's lengthy evolution, what truly forms the basis of consciousness is still an ongoing scientific debate. Approximately every 7 years, adult Vulcans undergo Pon farr, the Vulcan mating period. It is marked by intense emotions and primal urges, also referred to as a blood fever, that can kill a Vulcan if they are not satisfied. Symptoms include fever and elevated dopamine levels. Like betazoids, Vulcans can create a telepathic mating bond, even with non-Vulcans. Similar to what we discussed earlier, this mating bond is observed to transfer the behavioral effects of Pon farr to both Vulcans and non-Vulcans across even moderate distances. Interestingly, a Vulcan's first Pon farr can occur at any point throughout their life. For example, T'Pol's first Pon farr occurs when she is 65 years old, albeit by accident, whereas Spock experiences a Pon farr when he is much younger. As far as reproducing with other species, it was believed that Vulcans and humans could barely reproduce, even with medical intervention, as of the 2150s. However, further genetic research revealed many ways that various species could interbreed successfully. Ultimately, in the mid-23rd century, Spock becomes the first known human-Vulcan hybrid to survive into adulthood. Many Vulcan traits are dominant in human-Vulcan hybrids, including Vulcans' pointed ears, their green blood, and full range of physical and mental abilities. For more on the, let's say, biomechanics of interspecies reproduction, I happen to have a whole video about that. Link in the description. So, I've covered quite a bit in today's video. I discussed Vulcans' external differences and similarities to humans, as well as their internal anatomy, including the unique properties of their brain. I think it's important to consider the place the Katra has in Vulcan biology, history, and culture sets them apart from lots of other aliens throughout Star Trek. And it's most certainly a relic of their ancient past, particularly the alleged colonization of their planet by the Oretians, who themselves were able to transfer their consciousnesses into artificial receptacles. Speaking of which, how many of Vulcan's traits do you think naturally evolved on their homeworld versus being introduced artificially by the Oretians? Or do you think that the Vulcans are seeded direct descendants of the Oretians themselves? Furthermore, if you are a starship captain, would you recruit a Vulcan to serve on your crew? Why or why not? Let me know down below. With that, Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a thumbs up down below and don't forget to share it. That stuff really helps me out. If you haven't subscribed yet, be sure to do that as well so you won't miss future uploads, and click the bell icon to receive all notifications. If you want to support my work even further, you can become a patron at patreon.com/OrangeRiver, link in the description, or become a YouTube member by clicking the join button on my channel page. By becoming a patron or member, you also get access to awesome perks like behind the scenes photos and videos, patron and member only polls, name in the credits, merch discounts, and more. Or you can drop a one-time super thanks or PayPal donation. All are appreciated. Links to my PayPal as well as my social media and merch store are in the description too. Also, just as a reminder, I do have a second channel, OrangeRiver Plus, where I've uploaded the VODs of lots of my gaming streams with more on the way. And in addition to some other goofy one-offs and extra behind-the-scenes content, I've officially made it my second streaming platform. So be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any new content. That's all I have for this week. Live long and prosper.
Hey you! Yes, you! Sitting there on your ass! It's me, the ghost of Dr. Asukaza, coming back from reptilian hell to deliver you another very important message. The reason why I died is because that asshole killed me in the first issue. Like seriously? You impaled me? But whatever. Put down your replica of the Enterprise and listen up! Issue 3 of Star Trek Endurance is now available for patrons and members of OrangeRiver. Just sign up for $2 or more at patreon.com/OrangeRiver or click the join button on OrangeRiver's YouTube channel page. If Erica could figure it out, you can too. By the way, a lot of people seem to think I'm a Gorn. Well, I'm not a fucking Gorn, I'm a Nalish, you assholes. Look it up. We were in the animated series. It's canon. Anyway, back to reptilian hell.